Thanks to UT for having me here today. Thanks to all y'all for being out here today. I can start off by saying, number one, don't do what I do what I say. Because basically, I'm going to spend our whole time together talking about why you need to be outside, and I'm going to do it in the worst possible way. I've locked you in a room with no windows, no natural light, and it's going to be a lot of one-way communication today. We will save time for questions at the end, but and my message today is pretty much all there. This is not particle atomic science, but it is science. And there is a deeply important message here that I hope some of us already have, but maybe today it gets strengthened, and maybe you start thinking about it in new and different ways. So, and I want to apologize. I have a lot of photos in here, but today we're projecting on a non-white wall, this dark wall, so apparently they're not going to be so great. If the photos aren't enough, I tell you what, come out and see the real thing sometime out in the Smoky. So, all right, pop quiz. Here to start with, I mean it. Raise your hand as I ask you a couple different questions here. Raise your hand if you want people in our community to be more scientifically literate. Raise your hand if you want your neighbors, the community, the country to make more informed decisions about consumption, energy, food, lifestyles. Raise your hands. Raise your hands if you want all students, kids, adults, colleges, retired folks, to be more excited and invested in lifelong learning. Raise your hand. Raise your hand if you personally want to live a happier and healthier life. Raise your hand if you want to stand up and go outside right now. The title is simplistic. You want a happier people and better planet? Go outside. We all agree we want these things. We want to live in a world where these things are important and prioritized and like part of our daily life. But now I'm going to spend a few minutes giving you the sad, sorry truth, because that is not the reality for most of us. Here's how I want to spend my time this morning, just a little bit of overview, talking about what I call our lived reality. We just had a little show of hands what we'd like. Most of us are not living that reality. Let's imagine a different world. What if we wanted to make change? I'm going to talk a little bit about Tremont Institute and specifically what we do and the way we think about making change. And then there's going to be a call to action. The fact that you're here today, the fact that you raised your hand to some or all of those questions, you have a role in making change. All right, so a little bit about live reality. If anybody here has ever been to a conference, whether it was an academic conference, a business conference, you went for a 3-day training session, most of us have had some kind of experience like that. They're fun and exciting. You get to see old friends. Maybe it's in a fun, neat place you get to travel to. But oftentimes, you are locked in rooms for 8 hours a day, sitting in crowded, confined spaces with a lot of one-way communication. And we all get that sort of conference like glazing over. It's like the content you want to be more interested in, but you just physically can't. I would dare suggest to you that conference feeling of an 8-hour day is what our kids in school today experience every day. That is the lived reality for many and most students. Of course, there are exceptions, but that is the way we think about education today. Today's students are inside more, online. They have all this great technology and access to knowledge, but I can promise you, I bet our students here in Knox and Blount County know more about the Amazon than they do about the Smokies. We have a new generation fearful of dirt, forest, critters, and I mean fearful. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get sick. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get contaminated. Oh my gosh. Like legitimate fear. We have parents that are fearful. 80% of kids said it was uncomfortable to be outside due to things like bugs and heat. When you have lived your entire life indoors, it's not just like it's comfortable, that is your environment. The moment we ask you to step away from that for longer than a 5-minute period to get from the building to the car, seriously, people get uncomfortable. That is a major, major burden. That is what your average youth student reality feels like today. Our teachers that are in the classrooms with these students, their lived reality is also challenging. First off, I want it to be really clear before I talk about some of the problems with our teachers today is that without a doubt these folks are our superheroes. When I get to talking about the work we do at Tremont, it is only possible because of those teachers. It's only possible because they understand the value of outside. They understand the value of hands-on science, and they do so much to get their students there. But our teachers today don't have the support they need. Tennessee ranks 36th in educational well-being. That's done by Annie Casey Foundation, one of the country's best research foundations. New teachers in Tennessee are not fully prepared to teach in their assigned subject. What that basically means is that a large majority of teachers today, especially in science and math, did not major in science or math. Right? So they want to do well, they want to be teachers, they're excited, but they necessarily do not have the training and background that they're going to need to succeed when they show up to be a classroom teacher. Now, if they don't even have the skill set that they may need for their classroom experience, how many of them are going to have the training and support to do outdoor learning? When you're focused just on trying to be a master of your subject matter in a classroom, rare is the person who's going to make that jump immediately to go outside. That is a major issue for getting more students outside, or teachers who are prepared and able to make that change. Adults. So all y'all are here today, but don't go patting yourself on the back. Because while you like to think you're doing a lot better and you're not doing the conference lifestyle for 8 hours a day, you know what? That may be, but then that would make you exceptional, because that is not the reality. During the last decade, the proportion of American adults who qualify as being scientifically literate remained at 28%. This is a major study that was done, commissioned by NASA. And I understand you don't necessarily have to be outside to be scientifically literate. I'm not necessarily correlating those two things. Let me present a little more evidence. This is a study that was done from this year by a professor at Duke who did a survey of Duke faculty and discovered that environmentally committed university faculty, almost all the participants talked in great detail about their childhood experiences in nature, while providing much less detail about their nature-related adult experiences. So they studied dozens of professors who just self-described environmentally committed, love this, I value it. Don't walk the talk. They reflected fondly about, I remember as a kid, turning over rocks and going to camp and riding horses or whatever it might be. When you ask them to explain or describe their experience with nature today, it was less strong. This is a Pew study that came out on Wednesday, or maybe yesterday, and I just happened to discover it in my news feed, so I pulled it up. 29% of survey respondents said that government agencies get science facts right all or more than half the time. A higher percentage of Americans said science museums, documentaries, and science TV shows were more likely to get it right all or more than half the time. I wanted to show this today because what this tells me is that when I think of science literacy in our community, when I think of science literacy in our country, right now so much of our focus is on the politics of science as opposed to actual literacy around science. I find that worrying. I find that worrying because I'm in the business of trying to get people more excited about science, because it's awesome and fun and informative, and you can make good decisions. You can understand more about the world you live in and be more committed to your community when you're excited and understand the science behind it. I don't have time, nor is it the purpose of this talk, to go in and explain all these different opinions. People don't trust the government, they trust documentaries more. But the fact that there is something there, that there is a large portion of society that does not trust government-sponsored research, tells me that people are thinking or worrying less about science itself than the politics and drama of public science discussions. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's something to think about. We're spending more time in the public arena debating and talking about the legitimacy of science than actually trying to understand the science behind those engagements. So, all right, let's get into the real deal. Now I'm going to show you why outdoor learning and hands-on science works. This is a nice chart, or a nice graphic I pulled from the Children and Nature Network. By the way, it's a great website. If anybody is a student doing work in here, they maintain a very long and running bibliography. Children and Nature Network. Richard Louv is the sort of main thinker behind that. He's sort of one of the seminal thinkers in the field. This is a nice graphic that basically explains if you want to improve academic outcomes for youth, go outside. It's as simple as that. You want better academic performance in terms of reading, writing, math, and social studies, go outside. You want enhanced creativity and critical thinking, go outside. How about better focus and attention? How about a decrease in attention deficit disorders? How about an increase in better impulse control, less disruptive behavior, greater engagement with learning? That one's really important. Too often we gloss over it. People are going to do better when they're engaged, when they care. And if I take you guys outside right now, we went on a bug hunt, you'd be more engaged than if I just started showing slides of bugs. Like, that is a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer, but I also want you to appreciate that we have the academic chops to back that up. That there's a wealth of research that demonstrates why this works. You want better health for yourself? Go outside. This is a slide basically, again, showing you hundreds, thousands of research articles that demonstrate time outside leads to improved mood and mental health. Better sleep. I can tell you right now, when we're inside like this all day, artificial lighting, that sort of thing, your sleep patterns are disrupted. Better vitamin production, improved short-term memory. There's actually this year been a really hotbed of research around better vision and eye function for being outside. Stress relief, increased energy, lower blood pressure. The physicalness of being outside matters. If you want to study the Amazon and you want to do it on the internet and get the information and the data, that's great. You may have acquired information. I'm not going to say you acquired knowledge. You may have acquired information. But you missed, your brain, your body missed the physicality of being outside and all that brings with it. This is a neat little diagram here. It's just one of many I copied from the internet. It says park prescription. Has anybody heard of this idea? Prescriptions for nature? Yeah? So it is a growing idea, growing movement, if you will. This idea that actual doctors, actual healthcare providers would write you a prescription. Go outside. You don't only need a pill. You don't only maybe need this physical rehab or this other treatment. Here's a prescription. Spend 15 minutes outside every day going for a walk. Spend 10 minutes listening to birds outside. Spend 15 minutes just sitting there doing nothing. We're now, luckily, within this larger movement of people advocating for outdoor learning, making that long-needed connection between the benefit of being outside and health. There's not a lot of money to be made in prescribing people to go outside. And that way it's kind of a radical solution. But I do think, keep your eye on this movement, this idea. Tennessee has adopted some of this. The Tennessee Environmental Education Association is working with doctors around the state now to do this. All right, so I'm going to move on, and I want to talk a little bit specifically about Tremont. The way we think about the world. The way we think about the world is part of, let me back up before I lose your attention there on that slide. But the way we think about the world is driven, partly by this, not entirely by this. But understanding that the lived reality for students and adults, we need to do more, we need to do better. One obstacle I have in general in my job and my career field as I move around and give talks and meet people is that even if I present this evidence, we have a legitimacy gap. The value of hands-on science and outdoor learning has a legitimacy gap. Well, shoot, we don't have time to send our kids on a field trip. Well, shoot, I got standards I need to achieve in my classroom. I don't have time to go outside. What I want, when I get into start talking about Tremont here today, what I want you to understand sort of about what gets me up on a daily basis is that, gosh, we can change the world for the better. Like, I mean that. I'm not exaggerating. I came to Tremont 3.5 years ago because we can make the world better every day. And we do make the world better every day. And what we're doing matters for those individual people and our schools and our groups and our families and our community. But here's the other thing. We need to bring it to more people. It is not just enough for that small little slice of people that physically get to come out to our campus at Tremont. Outdoor learning matters for all of us. And it is a legitimate, proven tool. It is almost so simple that we delegitimize it. So if we take that sort of ethic I'm talking about, the belief that we can do good by creating outdoor experiences, that's what brings us to Tremont. 4 different areas that we think about if we want more people to be outside. We offer residential programs. By that, we have a full campus with a dorm and dining hall. Come on, you move in for 3 to 10 days. You live and learn inside the park. 500,000 acre classroom of Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Research that complements our learning laboratory. I'll give a couple examples of that, but we do research with UT, with Maryville College, with families, with communities, with all sorts of folks. Community engagement, that one is new in terms of being part of our daily mission, because we realize that it is not enough for us to just sit in our little area of the park and work with and support those people that can come to us. We need to be a better leader in the community, but we also need to position ourselves as an organization to be a better support for the community. And then that last one there, advocacy for outdoor learning. I think that's the place right now that we are really putting a lot of thought and focus into. Because that lived reality in our communities and our schools and our families and our homes is devoid of nature and time outside to where it's become the standard to even forget about it. It sounds crazy, but I'm here today because I'm advocating for outdoor experiences. We have got to do more of that. We have to do more of it and not just like, oh, make the time to come out on a weekend. When I talk about the radicalness of this, I mean what we do should be your classroom day. What we do should be your college degree. What we do should be your lived reality, not an end-of-the-day field trip. I threw in just a couple basics there so you understand who we are as an organization, and I think that's important, especially for students in the community, to understand, you know, we make choices about what we want to do and what we can do. So we have our residential campus, 6,000 people a year. Essentially, you know, we serve, I like to say, we serve anybody from ages 5 to 95. Really, we have something for everybody. As an organization, Tremont is a nonprofit. It is an independent nonprofit. And what that means is I report, as a CEO, I report to a board of directors. We've got about 30 full-time staff that live and work at Tremont. And we're what you call a partner of the park. A lot of us have probably heard in popular media this idea of a public-private partnership. You hear a lot, especially in the business world. We're actually a pretty good manifestation of that. We have a long-term operating agreement with the National Park Service that allows us to physically live inside the park and have that campus, because we help the park achieve its mission of education. And we're the only place in the park where you can come and do multi-day residential education. So that's a little bit about the 4 spheres that we work in. I'm so sorry these photographs aren't turning out. That is a stunningly beautiful black and white photo of a kid sitting in Cades Cove writing in their journal. All right, so I talked about those 4 general areas. I don't have time, of course, to go into all 140 programs. I really want to just focus on one today specifically. I want you to imagine that if half of every school day was outside. Really. It could be. It really could be. At first, when you first read that, you may think, like, wow, that sounds great, but not practical. Really? I promise you that outdoor learning can deliver all those better academic outcomes, all those better health outcomes, and guess what? We can also do it cheaper. So now when I tell you, imagine if half of every school day was outside in the state of Tennessee. I used to think that was like I used to actually go and give speeches and talk about it like it was a big idea that was unachievable. I actually think that is totally achievable today. I really, really do. It involves all 4 of those areas to get it done in terms of the advocacy and the policies and the partners and the government support. But what I want to talk about today really are 2 main things that we would need to do if we actually wanted half of every school day to be outside. A shift in perception and confident and trained educators. Just a minute, I'll go on and speak more about confident and trained educators, but let me say a little bit about that shift in perception. When I first put that slide up there a second ago and said, imagine if half of every school day was outside, I dare say some of us had that idea, like, that sounds great, but in the back of our mind, we're instantly dismissing it as that is not achievable. That is the perception we have to change. And right now, this is probably a somewhat like-minded group that believes in the value of outdoor learning. When I talk about a shift in perception, I wish I had more time to go into it. What I mean is that a shift in belief that outdoor learning works. A basic but extremely challenging shift that not every day has to be indoors. That is almost heretical to say that. For the student who is scared of dirt, for the person who is uncomfortable in heat. We also convince ourselves that, you know what, coming to spaces like this and putting our students in a room like this for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, it's just more efficient, it's easier, there's less liability, all those sorts of things. I disagree. I disagree, and I have a lot of evidence to back me up. I'm going to have to move on in the presentation. Call me, come see me if you want to talk about that. But in your heart, know that when we're talking about getting more people outside, it's not only convincing people, come out to the park and go look for birds on this single day. I'm saying you need to think about how we would create policies, government budgets, assessment and evaluation of the way we think of education, i.e. challenging that notion of standards-based learning, all of those things. Let me move on to this idea of confident and trained educators. While Tremont is constantly thinking and working at that shift on a day-to-day level in terms of how we're spending our time, this confident and trained educators is a big, big part of what we're doing right now and how I believe that we're uniquely positioned to make actionable change. So this is our learning cycle. This diagram, we're not going to go into it in depth, but like most schools, universities, we've given a lot of thought when we think about learning cycle. I talked about that legitimacy gap. A lot of people think, oh, well, we just bring kids out there and let them run around, you know, and just let them explore and have nature. Well, believe it or not, some of that happens, but it happens because the research of brain-based learning supports it. The truth is, we have a very research-driven curricula. Our faculty, most of them have graduate degrees. They're professional educators. That's what we do. We don't just willy-nilly show up. We're trying to meet students where they are today. We can't use those sort of educational norms. People think about like interpretation old school. If you came out to a park and I was standing there wearing a uniform and this is the mighty oak tree. It has blah, 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 blah. Shoot, we don't do any of that. That is not the way most people think. That is not the way most people learn. And quite frankly, it's boring. If you really want to be successful, you have to engage students through a series of the way they progress through learning. And I think the things I really want to focus on right now are this discovery and wonder. I was talking to somebody even before we started. That is probably one of the most important things that is missing and needs that shift in perception when we think about education. A belief that people want to learn, that people are like born discoverers, that we are born investigators and adventurers. And like, if you just set us free, let us go out and ask questions and figure out how to answer them. We will. That requires, if we actually wanted to do that on a daily basis for most education, including universities, of which, I'm a member of the academy, I'm totally guilty of it as well. We don't do that. I would dare say very little of formal education is around discovery and wonder. Yet it works. We want students more engaged, higher functioning, better critical thinking. Get them excited. Let them ask their own questions. We've created a culture around science instruction that basically says that only scientists know how to ask good questions. You will see a student basically scared to say, I wonder about that bug, or I wonder about that rock, or is that a lichen? They devalue their question instantly because they figure, well, I'm not a scientist, my questions aren't very good. Because we have created a system of science where it's information giving and not knowledge creation. I want to speak briefly about personal, local, relevant. Again, this is how we flip the model on its head. This is a no-brainer. But it is not the norm for most institutions. Personal. We start with the belief that you have a personal stake in your learning. That if learning is going to be effective and like cause your heart to feel good and your soul and for you to be excited and interesting, it should be personal. Why study about something you don't care about? Local. I am not kidding when I say go home tonight, open any textbook, any paper, anything you want. How much are you reading, learning, hearing, studying about local environmental issues, local conditions, local ecology, local places, as opposed to far-flung international places? I'm not saying don't learn about those places. I've spent the majority of my adult life living and traveling overseas. But you start with understanding your own home. If we want to teach ecology, if you want to teach weather, you want to teach water cycles, start with the Smokies. This is one of the most biodiverse, amazing, awesome places in the world. And to my knowledge, there are very few local schools who are spending entire chapters and modules on it. Lastly is this relevant part. And this is the part of learning in many learning cycles that is missing. Here it's relevant, here it's called reflection. Take time. Take time at the end of this session, at the end of the day, at the end of your next trip, your next class, wherever you go. Take time to think. Wow, what did you just experience? How do you feel about that? Take time to really do very little and let those connections be made in your head. If you were studying a hard topic in geosciences, and you want to learn, you really want to acquire those higher level critical thinking skills, take time to reflect. And then think about, how does this matter to me? Why does this matter to me? Most of us, when we participate in formal education, whatever it might be, do not get that last stage. Why does this matter to me? And without it, do not assume that you will make those connections in your own head and in your own heart. One of the things we've done in the last year at Tremont is really, twist the arms of some of our visiting teachers to accept more reflection time at the end of the day, at the end of an experience. We have, when schools come out, you're in the park, and I want to be busy every day. We only here for 3 days. We need to go this and this and this. We need to see that and do this lesson and all of it. That somehow more is better. I was so guilty of that when I did study abroad. I taught in more than 20 countries in these places, and I thought I just had to run us all ragged. We had to see everything. And it was the power of personal, experiential learning that helped me discover that more is not better. That 30 minutes at the end of the day, sitting on the rocks in the stream at Tremont in the Smokies, is probably when those most powerful connections happen. That is when learning becomes relevant. That is where then you can go off in your own life, in your own community, and take it to the next stage. Let's talk a little bit about teacher training. First off, let's brag on this lady right here who is sitting in the back row, Tricia Hedinger. Thanks for being here. I'm sorry that picture did not show up. I'm going to talk about her program in just a second, and that's a teacher workshop we have up at the top there. So I said Tremont, one of the ways we're really thinking about how do we move that needle? We can't do everything. We're a small nonprofit. Shoot, I can't spend every day writing letters to the governor and going to conferences and leading a team and I spend a lot of time raising money. Can't do all of that. So our target area is really this teacher training. The research that has been done at Tremont in the last decade, that's been done around the country and the world with our peers, and then we've just done some research, some focus groups earlier this spring with about 50 teachers, principals, and administrators from around the region. Gary Skolitz and his group helped facilitate some of that, and they're here today as well. One of the main things that we know for sure, if you want a teacher to go outside, to take their students outside, and I don't just mean at Tremont, I mean stepping outside at Clayton Bradley, at Fulton High School for 2 minutes. Teachers need confidence in themselves and in their students. That is probably the most important thing that is lacking. That teachers, most of us as teachers, we have our narrow lane. The moment somebody asks us to step out of our lane, we get really uncomfortable. Because guess what? Students are going to start asking you a lot of questions that you don't know the answer to. What's this? How's that work? Where'd that come from? What's the Latin name? This, the history, the date. As a teacher, you have to get really comfortable with it, saying like, I don't know. I don't know. But let's go find out together. That's a very different way to think about education. Again, personal experience. I will never forget the first time I took a college group abroad. It was actually Cambridge, England, which is a pretty light duty compared to, I used to take students to Serengeti and other places. By the end of the first week, after hearing myself say, I don't know, to students 100 times asking me questions I didn't know, I started to have a little crisis of confidence. Like, why am I here? Like, why did I get hired? Clearly, I know nothing about Cambridge. I don't know anything about this place. I don't know anything about this history. And it took months, or more likely years of me being in that role to get comfortable with the fact that the value I added was not as Wikipedia on site. Like, I can't compete with Wikipedia. I am not in the information business. I'm in the process business. The value I brought as a teacher in that moment was being the guide by the side, not what we call the sage on the stage. So we need teachers to get that confidence in themselves. If you want to actually teach in the Smokies, shoot, you don't need to know all about the Smokies. You don't have to know all the Latin names. Yeah, you should have some content. We'll help you get there, but don't let that be a major hurdle. The other thing, confidence in their students. It's a great quote from one of the focus groups we did earlier this year where the teacher said, I have been negligent basically in taking my students outside because I thought they couldn't use it to its fullest capacity. They didn't trust their students to actually engage and be excited in that moment. We create classrooms that are based on very strict discipline. And we often want to pick up that classroom and move it outside. And when a student actually gets interested in watching that hawk fly over or sees a snake or wonders what's under that rock and tries to investigate, we see that as like, oh, that kid's distracted. They're not engaged. When it's just the opposite. They are more engaged, more in that moment, higher level of participation than they have ever had. Trust. There's a reason they want to turn over that rock. Let them turn it over. That is a simple statement. That is a radical shift in perception of education and the way we think about working with learners of all ages. Mark, I've got about 5 minutes, it looks like. Help them gain that confidence. So we do that with workshops, formal training, We've just gotten a large grant from the National Park Foundation. We're going to be working with a dozen teams of teachers from around East Tennessee to help them bring some of these techniques to their schoolyards in Blount County, in Knox County, and Sevier County, providing them actual resources to do that. There are methods that you can learn to facilitate outdoor learning. We understand that standards is the reality of classroom teachers. We're not saying come out and just have a good time. We're saying we know we can help you achieve your standards. What standards do you want to achieve? We can design a curriculum and experience, work with you so that next year you know how to design your own curriculum and experience to do outdoor learning and still achieve standards. And then, so those are classroom teachers. I just want to mention we work with other what are called informal educators and non-classroom teachers. Tricia, the gal back here, we've worked with her in the last 3 years on Volunteer Your Voice program. That is a program where the Department of Speech Pathology and Audiology, they take youth, kids in the summer who are in speech therapy. They take those kids and they're clinicians in training, graduate students basically doing a degree, and they come out to Tremont, and the kids are doing their speech therapy in a natural setting, and which is amazing in and of itself, and she's had some papers published and been on TV and talked about the value of that. Why that program for us at Tremont is also impactful, aside from reaching those individual kids who have, without a doubt, I mean, I cry every time they do their presentations because these kids have life-changing experiences. The other thing I really love about that is a group of about 10 graduate students who are now starting to imagine a world where, you know, traditional speech therapy can be done in a river, on a trail, outside, changing that perception of where formal learning needs to happen. This is just a very quick word. I want to finish up and leave time for questions about research we're doing with partners. I don't think Todd is here today. Todd is a UT PhD student that we're doing a eDNA research project with. E stands for environmental DNA. Basically, we've trained a group of volunteers through our citizen science program who scoop up water samples in the park. That water goes off to a lab, and then Todd is sequencing the DNA of skin cells and material found in that to figure out what salamanders live in what plots. And why this is sort of groundbreaking is we're the first people in the world that we know of to use volunteers, citizen science, to do that data collection in its first stage, which is like mind-blowing. This used to be you had to hike, 10 miles out with research gear and all this other stuff. Now you can just ask somebody when they're out on the trail, scoop up that water and bring it back for me. We do a lot of avian monitoring. We're designing now a new workshop with Cornell Ornithology, which is one of the world's premier bird groups. We do bird banding in the summer. We've done all sorts of habitat studies with research partners around the country. The monarch tagging we're really quite famous for. We do in the fall, actually that's going on right now, where we capture live monarchs that are mid-migration on their way to Mexico. Grab them, you put a little sticker on them that's got an ID number, let them go, they continue down to Mexico, and then in the winter or the following years, researchers in Mexico go and search the forest floor for dead monarchs or for stickers, and then they use those data points to understand this extremely complex migration of monarchs. I mean, you think you understand nature and science and have like amazing belief and the power of evolution and science? Wow, monarchs, it will blow your mind if you don't know about them already. Well, this is really what I want to finish in terms of your role. If you're here today, you have a role. No one gets to leave here today without taking a little inner pledge. I won't make you take a formal pledge. Saying, I have a role, I want to do something, I want to be involved. Join a program. By that I mean come to Tremont, do a program. Do a program with UT, IMES, go outside. Join an experience. Sponsor a student. Did I mention I fundraise a lot? To actually come to Tremont, you have to pay a fee. Our school kids pay a fee. If you want to do women's backpacking, you got to pay a fee. But specifically for our school kids, we try and give away a lot of scholarships, so donate. I'm not crass, are you kidding me? Give me money. Give me money because I'm going to use it. My team is going to use it to change a kid's life. Be an advocate. Call the principal, call the superintendent, write a letter to the governor. Do you know who sits on your local school board? Do they ever hear from you? Are we taking our kids outside? Y'all hear a lot about one-to-one. Now you're hearing one to the world in terms of technology, and every kid needs a computer. Great, I love my computer. We need those. That cannot be the sole focus of what we're talking about at school board meetings, which sometimes when I go to them, that's what it is. My hope is that with your help as an advocate, we can swing that pendulum back and find some balance with outdoor learning as well. Be a partner. I just mentioned lots of folks we work with. Some of the folks are in here I'm going to be working with in the future. Come see us. Let us know how we can help you. Let us know if there's something you can do for us. Lastly on there, be a role model. I'm a terrible role model standing here today because I'm speaking at you. That's why I started off very intentionally saying, don't do as I say, or don't do as I do as I say. Be a role model. Tonight, tomorrow morning, take those extra 10 minutes, go outside. Go turn over a rock. Go find something you don't know anything about. Just ask yourself, wow, what the heck is that? Even if you don't find out, don't pull out your phone. You don't have to name that thing right away. Sit and listen to a bird. Spend 5 minutes looking at the sky. When was the last time y'all did that? Be a role model. Actually do a little something. And here's my final words. I'm going to read a quote from a high school student. So this summer, as we know, of course, Professor Mark Littman, an eclipse expert and science writer, did a lot of promotion, a lot of public discussion about the solar eclipse we just had. So we were really lucky at Tremont. We wrote some grants and we got financial support from First Tennessee Foundation and the American Astronomy Society. And we had 20 students, high school students, from Fulton High School, which is one of our city, Knoxville City high schools, not far from here, and 2 of their teachers. And they came out and they did a 4-day residential science program at Tremont, leading up to and culminating in those students being public docents in Cades Cove for the park's public eclipse event. So over a few days, those kids got training to explain about the eclipse, and they went out and had a booth and had sessions and taught over 1,000 members of the general public. And it was awesome. You know, as you can imagine, like that is like when it all comes together. You got community donors who support it, teachers at Fulton High School said, yeah, we're going to do this. Kids, by the way, I don't know if you've been told, you know, when you're in high school, being into science is not cool. You know, and a lot of these kids did not know each other at school, who came out, and their parents and the community that allowed them to come, and they had an amazing experience. And the feedback we got from the public in the park was amazing. But here's a quote that I want to finish with. One of the students, when we asked them to do an assessment, this is what they wrote. And you can close your eyes and sit back if you like. It's not super long, but there's another life instead of cell phones and social media, Snapchat and video games, all that stuff. There's something else out there that we can all do instead of just having our heads in our phones. Since my phone broke during this eclipse trip, I've been fully focused on nature, and I haven't been worried about my phone. And it's helping. It's like somebody broke my phone for a reason. There's something else out there that I need to see, that we all need to see, that other people need to experience too. So tell people, bring people, do something. Show people that nature is nice. That's the wisdom of an 11th grade student who had not been to the Smokies and not really spent time outside. That is the goal. That is the aim. I hope you want to be part of creating more opportunity for that. So with that, I say thank you. And I think we have a few minutes for questions. So, thank you. And you can ask hard ones, because I'm really good at saying, I don't know.
You talked about teaching audiology, speech pathology outside. What other kind of more unusual courses, topics have y'all helped teachers learn to teach outside? Computer science, for example, are some of the ones that people would have more like, hey, we need.
Right. That is a great question. I would say the audiology is definitely pushing the boundary on that. The 2 subjects I think of right off the bat that are very easy to move outside, but at first people were like, no, are physics and math. So physics is, I mean, whether we have a physics lesson that we can run anywhere from 5th grade to college. And to understand basic principles of physics and energy and engineering, you know, just go and look at any landscape. And those do not need technology necessarily on the trail. And math is the other one. And that can actually take that, say, a physics lesson further. So on a daily basis for middle school students, you're going to encounter math at least 3 times during the day outside of a lesson that I can think of. Number one, you're going to go to our weather station in the morning, learn how to read a barometer, learn how to record details, all that sort of thing. You're going to take that data information, enter it into our weather station at our campus, and then use complex charts and graphs to then predict the weather. We do a food waste program. We actually have to measure your food, and at the end of the day or the end of the 3-day experience, plot it out on a graph and understand pounds per person and all that sort of stuff. And in multiple other places during the day. To some extent, I think, if I may speak just more broadly and not specifically about a program, while I have said there's a great need to convince people in the value of learning, it is typically easier to convince people in the value of like the STEM science part, because people are like, oh, it's nature, that makes sense. We'll study ecology in a forest. What we are now seeing, especially in Tennessee, where our science scores are holding, or in some cases going up, or language arts are going down, is the value of doing language arts outside. And that is as simple as, like, if you have a school here in town with this amazing greenway system, by the way. Knoxville has awesome outdoor experiences that no one is using as learning spaces. Go outside. That would be a radical proposal to do language arts outside. I know it sounds crazy, but yeah. And in a number of college programs and stuff. So Tricia, please.
I mean, I think, like you're saying, that audiology and speech pathology seemed like such a leap. I felt like it didn't seem like a leap at all to me to practice it outside, and that we're talking about communicating and asking questions and answering questions and how to use all your speech and language skills, and then also kids with hearing disabilities who you have to learn how to block out environmental noise and focus on a speaker, or asking for repetitions, or I didn't hear that, in all different contexts. So I think even just meeting with different departments to say what seems obvious to you or what seems like a logical thing is kind of great, because I felt like it was an easy transition. I mean, when we got out there, it was great. And we saw, even graduate students would say, things that I wanted to see in the therapy room, I've been working on for months. I got them out there, and in 2 days, it was drastic difference. So it was not a big leap at all, really.
The thought I would leave you with tonight is send me an email and follow up and tell me what subjects you think we can't teach outside. I mean that. Like, what are those experiences we could not do outside? And until you tell me and demonstrate to me with good evidence that they exist, I will argue that all of them. Yes. Oh, sorry, Mark.
No, go ahead. Back here.
Oh, no, yeah, you mentioned specific techniques and methods that are used to help students master topics in an outdoor learning environment, and I was just wondering about maybe an example of a particular method that you would use specific to outdoor learning math.
So I can go into a little bit of explanation. Quite frankly, I don't teach in the program, so I'm a poor person to ask. I wish one of our faculty that do this on a daily basis were here to really give you a great example. But in the last 2 years, I think one of the biggest shifts we've had is we're that brain-based model. Specifically, we have adapted what's known as BEATLES. And that is an acronym for Better Environmental Education Through Learning something, something, something. It is a national program. We were invited by UC Berkeley, and we sent a couple of our faculty out there who got trained in it. Since then, Berkeley has sent their postdocs out to us several times to monitor and see what we're doing. And in terms of how that model translates into an actual lesson, I think one of the biggest things that we have done, and we're trying to get teachers that are, visiting teachers that have brought their school group, is one of the very first things to do. If you were a real scientist and I dropped you off somewhere around the world or somewhere in a community you didn't know, what's the very first thing you'd do? You just observe. Look around. Observe. Take a few moments. Just be quiet, look around. What's around here? What are you touching? What are you sensing? It sounds crazy. Use your senses. Any good scientist in the field, and I don't care whether it's computers or biology, they're going to touch things and smell it and taste it. You're going to wonder about it, and you're going to make observations. From those observations, then your questions start popping up. Gosh, I wonder if this plastic was recycled. I wonder where these are made. I wonder if they're Chinese, or I wonder. So now the first few minutes of a lesson, again, whether it's a stream ecology, forest, you're on a trail, you're in the field, you're in the river, now you're letting the student use their own sense of curiosity and wonder to design a question. Hopefully, depending on the lesson, this doesn't happen in every lesson, but then you're saying, okay, so you wonder if this is made from recycled materials. Richard, that was your question. What information do you think would help us solve that question? So now you're asking the student, how would we prove that? So now the students start to say, well, gosh, we could track down the manufacturer, or maybe there's like some polymer computer thing, we acid test this, we could. Now the student themselves designing their question, first off, you're legitimizing their question. It's a question that they came up with, so they're probably interested in it. You're not leading them down the scientific inquiry. You're letting them discover and create that path themselves. That is just basic steps of the model and that learning cycle I mentioned is a big part of it. If you would really like to know more, please come out and see us, call us. Our faculty, any of us would be glad to host you or share materials with you. Anything we can, we'd love to.
Time for maybe one more question.
Do you think, you mentioned there is a disconnection with nature in general, and there is a poor literacy in science in general? Do you think that is a connection between those? Like, we spend less time in the outdoors with nature, so science that is about nature, we don't understand it. Do you think?
I do, and I mean there's some research that would demonstrate that too. So that the basic questioning being, is time outside correlated to scientific illiteracy, if you will? And there definitely is research that supports that. And one of the most obvious drivers of that is when you think about learning. If I go back to what we were talking about, like people think of learning just as like acquiring information. That is not learning, right? That's acquiring information. Knowledge is something we create in ourselves. You can give me information. I create knowledge. And especially I create knowledge and meaning through direct experience. That is where most of the scientific literature starts from and totally demonstrates, is that through experience, and y'all know this in your daily lives, that is where the most powerful learning experiences come from. We take that now into, I did not have time to go into it today, but the ideas of stewardship, being a good steward, having a connection to nature. You break it down to this simple premise, and I actually stole this quote from Sally Jewell, who I met a couple years ago, the former Secretary of Interior, who she always says that, how can you expect somebody to care about nature if they've never been in it? And so that's caring about nature, and I understand that efficacy, that attitude, that passion of nature does not necessarily translate into literacy. Because you can have some folks that are really passionate about nature and they don't know anything about it. But what we do see is that people who spend more time outside and are more involved in outdoor activities have higher rates of literacy, specifically around stewardship, conservation, ecology. Do they have a higher rate of literacy in particle science and those sorts of things? Perhaps not. You're not going to make any people more stupider by taking them outside, I can tell you that much.
Let's all thank Dr. Jones.
Thank you.